Hello guys, my name is Reza and welcome to my channel. We're about to unpack another cool trick using Unreal Engine. For today's tutorial, I guide you step by step through the process of crafting a visually captivating and dynamic lava material. Harness the power of Unreal Engine's material editor as I unveil the secret behind the dynamic flow, incandescent glow, and textures that make up this captivating substance. Just like always, we have a lot to cover, so let's get started. As usual, we're going to start from scratch. This is a simple scene that I put together. It looks fancy, but it's actually very simple. I created few crystals, I scattered them around, and the topology is pretty bad, I'm not gonna lie, but we are going to use that just for set dressing. So what I can do is to go in here and go to mesh and combine the mesh. Once that's done, I'm just going to delete by type history, and this guy, which I'm gonna call cave, is ready to go for export. So I'm gonna go to export selection, make sure the FBX is selected, and everything else you can leave it as default. Now in here, I'm not going to change much. I need to make sure that smooth groups are, this tick box is there, tangents and binormals there, and that should really do the trick. And again, if you've been following my Unreal Engine tutorials, you know that I have a tendency to actually go to advanced options into axis conversion if you are using Maya, and I set my up axis into Y, but of course this can be applied to any software packages. Now, in order not to waste any time, I just went ahead and brought the environment in and placed it nicely. So this is the cave that I brought in. I also brought in a simple plane, and if I go ahead and minimize my content drawer, you can see I just placed it here. That would be the plane that I'm going to assign material to. So I nicely placed that in here and I'm ready to go. Also, I put together a material folder, which I'm going to create material here, and I've got textures folder from the prop. You won't be seeing much, but well, I thought I would just bring the textures with me and use it for my scene. You may have noticed that I have no lights in the scene because we are going to use glow and incandescence in order to brighten up the environment. So for this particular case, I switched to unlit from lit, otherwise I won't be able to see anything. But rest assured, the majority time we are going to spend inside this material folder. So let's quickly go to the next chapter and start putting together our nodes using a simple material node. All right. Let's start with the easy bit by creating one and only material that we are going to use. So mm_lava. I'm going to double click on that and dock that right next to my main so I can kind of easily go back and forth. As for the main material node itself, I won't be changing the domain, mode, or shading model. So we'll leave that as is. Now, the objective for the first chapter is to just establish the main node, which is our noise node. Feel free to capture your own lava texture node. Be mindful of the midtones, super whites, and dark points. But for now, we're just going to use, for the sake of simplicity, everyone can follow along with this. We're going to use the textures within the starter content. And yes, your starter content needs to be ticked when you create this project. Now, there is one called a T-Perlin noise that I quite like. So if I type in Perlin, there you go, T-Perlin noise, works for us just fine. Obviously, the rigid texture is not going to help. So what I need is to move that in x-axis. So to do that, I'm using a panner node, which I have used a lot in my tutorials, especially animating materials video. Definitely check that out if you're not familiar with this node. That goes into my UV. And of course, I need to be mindful of its coordinates because it asks for it and it helps us to tile based on the environment that we have. So that's easy. We've already talked about it many times. Texture coordinate can do the trick for us. I'm going to bring in a multiply node by holding down M, left click, and that goes to A. I really don't want to change B at this point, no big deal, but of course you can always have a different constant to control it far better. And of course I need speed, and I am going to parameterize that because I really would like to bring this to my material instance. By the end of this tutorial you will see how easy it gets for us to have all these key expressions and properties into our material instance, so we really don't need to open this material graph ever again. So right click, promote to material. I'm going to call that speed lava A. Bring that here. Now in here we need to be very careful not to put random numbers. It has to be very subtle. If you look at lava and references on the internet, you will realize that unlike what you see in sort of stylized effects, lava moves very slowly, and that can really add to the realism of my end result. So I'm not really sure what to put, really, to be honest, here at this point, but I'm just going to start with, let's say, 0.02. Very subtle number. Now I'm looking at this Perlin noise, and I want to sort of undersaturate that. You will see that I'm going to make 2 of these, so I don't want to go too strong with the saturation. Now every time you want to add or reduce saturation, the best tool would be the power node. RGB goes to base, and base goes into your color, and for this constant exponent I can probably reduce this down. You can see I can increase that to get a super black area. So increasing this value will add to the dark values, and reducing it will introduce more white colors. So I am going to start with something like 0.6 to just tone down the blacks a little bit. Again, I'm in experiment phase. You may see me going back and forth and changing this value. That's part of the deal, but for now it should work well for us. Now we're almost there to move on to the next chapter. This one was pretty straightforward. 2 things I need to do for the optimization's sake. First things first, you may have noticed that I am plugging RGB into base, and it's a grayscale image. So basically RG and B are more or less the same. So why don't we cut down the computational time by just adding one of the channels, in this case R. Another issue that I have is it's set to base color, and I really don't use base color at this point. I'll be using emissive color. So why don't I just switch to emissive, and it's cheaper to run, and at the end of the day I would like to get a little bit of glow, and emissive certainly is going to help. All right, I am going to zoom back, move these guys way back, because you'll see that I will be having some colors in there, which we are going to deal in the next chapter. All right, let's start by using this texture as our alpha. Now, every time we have inputs and we would like to bring an alpha to control those inputs, it can be constant, it can be texture, we use linear interpolate. So if I type in lerp, linear interpolate shows up. So why don't we just go ahead and assign that to our alpha, and then we have A and B to deal with. For now, let's work out our B channel, which can be a simple constant. Now I want this to be something yellowish. So for hue I may actually, for red I may try 2, and for this one something like 0.25 to give us a complete sort of orangey look. That should do the trick. I'm just going to plug that to B, and this one goes to my emissive color. Yeah, that's not too bad. Again, we are going to introduce more yellow into that, but for now that works for us. It's a little bit undersaturated, so why don't I use a multiply to up the values. So holding down M, left click to bring in a multiply, control to unplug, and plug to emissive again. And I definitely would like to parameterize this B because that is the intensity of my emissive. So promote, and then I'm going to call that emissive intensity. So I can upres the emissive intensity anytime I want. At the moment it's defaulted to 0. Let's put a crazy number here, something like 50. That might be a bit too much. 30. Yeah, that 30 works for us. And you can see something is there, but we are going to make those spots way more pronounced. But for now, if you would like to see more black, you know what to do. We can actually up that. Something like 2 will gives us the result. I may reduce that 30 to something like 25. I still feel like it was a bit too much. And of course, we can just bring that to 3. And you can see that we get something that we can work with. Although, as I'm going to use layers of these guys and put them on top of each other to give ourselves a little bit of depth, remember that all of these values will be doubled. So at the end of the day, I need to go back and reduce those. But if you visually would like to see where you're going, basically that's how you do it, using a power and your emissive intensity to fine-tune the look. This will change. Now let's go to the next chapter and see how we can add to what we already have and make this more complete. All right, let's continue by duplicating this alpha and add layers on top of our current layer so it doesn't look flat. Also, I'm noticing that there's a little bit of a flare going on that might come from my roughness. So why don't I create just a single constant, holding down 1, click for constant, bring that in and just set that to 1 so we get no specularity whatsoever. Cool. That works well. Also, one thing that I need to be mindful of is the color of the A. So what I can do is press another 3. And for this one, we are going to create something super dark, not completely dark, but I'm going to sort of go off of what I had before. I believe that was 2 and that was 0.25. So I'm just going to bring this down to close to black. I don't want that to be pure black, but close to black will do just fine. So that is better. So I have this and I have this. Now it's time to duplicate those to create some sort of a layer. So I am going to press Control C and Control V. Let's bring them in. And the way that we connect them is actually very simple. Every time we have 2 channels and we don't require an alpha, if you want to multiply the values, well, the name suggests is functionality. Multiply will do the trick. And of course, this multiply will go into our alpha to cater for our alpha. Now you understand what I started with some low values, because obviously this is way too much now. But what I would like to do is just to give it a bit of a randomization here, especially in the panner speed. So the panner speed, now I'm going to call this one lava B. I might actually create spaces here. There's nothing wrong with putting spaces when you're working with naming conventions inside your material instance. So 0.2 and 0.2, how about setting that to 0.1? And of course, with this exponential, it's a bit too harsh. What if I put this one to 0.6? Now you can see layers on top of each other are stacking up, and maybe something like 3 on this one still should work. I might actually go a little bit higher on one of the layers. So I'm going to go 3 just to be able to see how we are sort of moving from one layer to the other layer, and it creates a sense of depth, which I really like. Now we're going in here, and it would be a great idea to be able to sort of have a different set of colors for one of the layers, so both layers are not looking exactly the same. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, let's do that then. Let's duplicate these guys. I'm going to just bring this one right here so we have enough real estate, and I'm probably going to move all of these guys a little bit to the back so there won't be any shortage of space, so to speak. Now we have one lerp node. Well, let's duplicate them. Control C, Control V, bring them here, and now we can basically use a simple multiply node again to pull off the same trick. So one here goes to B, one here goes to A, and the result goes to the multiply. Now, of course, with this one, we need to tweak some colors because the whole idea behind putting two sets of colors is to break up the colors. So for this one now, it's the opportunity for me to sort of get some sort of a yellowish type of color. Maybe one, or if I push down, what's going to happen? Yeah, one should do the trick, really. I don't want to make it too orangey altogether. Also, I feel like the intensity of my emission is not up enough, and if I look at here, maybe this is too much black that I'm getting. So again, this is what I talked about when I said we need to go back and forth and tweak things. Maybe 2.2 is a better value. Yep, I'm quite happy with that. And let's go into emissive intensity and up that. Something like 50 should do the trick for us. I don't want to show the background and I don't want to show the grid. Yeah, that definitely works quite well. Another thing that I notice is between the two layers in here, when we have the panner, it would be really nice to separate those ever so slightly. And the way I do that in Unreal Engine is by using a simple add node. So if I just press tab and drop in an add, that goes to my UV, A goes in here, and for B I am going to put something around 10-ish probably. Now it looks a lot better. Okay, let's think about what else we can do to fix things. Now, before I get ahead of myself, why don't I just drop that in to my plane and just get an estimation of the direction I'm heading to see if it's any good. So what I'm going to do, I am going to go to my material and make a material instance. That's the whole purpose behind parameterizing lava. And I am going to sort of make that float so I can sort of assign that to my plane. So I'm going to pick that instance, drop that in, and let's look at it with lit. All right, it's not too bad, but I'm sure we can do better. There are a few problems in here. The first problem is, although I'm getting different layers and they work really well, I can make more adjustment to make it believable. Another issue that I have with this is it's just very, very flat. Wouldn't that be nice to bring some sort of a displacement or normal, so they go slightly up and down, not too much of course to make it look funny or unrealistic, but just enough to separate this from, let's say, a flat plane. And this is a trick that I used for my water tutorial, and I am going to sort of repurpose what we create in our translucent water tutorial. The four-way nodes that I used to help me out with this particular example. But for now, that gives me a good sort of ballpark, the direction I'm heading, not too bad. Let's go back here and see what else we can do to enhance the result. Now, we can fine-tune things more efficiently, but for now I'm just going to select these guys and I'm going to call them colors, and I'm going to select these guys and I'm going to call that lava movement, so we know what comment node or backdrop node is in charge of what exactly. And feel free to sort of select that and recolor that if you want to, but for now this works well for us and we have enough organization to know what's going on. Now let's start with the displacement. So I'm going to create a texture sample. I'm going to bring that in. For the texture sample, what you want to look for is T underscore water M. Now I'm going to right click and create a material function call. And in that, we're going to look for four-way and bring in material function motion four-way chaos. And that gives us a really great tool to be able to move things up and down and sort of fake the water or liquid looking material. Now this by default doesn't go in there because we need to make sure that we convert this to texture object. Now we can easily connect that in. Now what I'm going to do is just to create a component mask, and I need to make sure that I'm just targeting the red channel. I'm going to go in here and append it. So using an append node, append vector, I'm just going to drop that in, putting the B into component mask, and then we simply bring a to vector by holding down to left click and bringing that into our A. So this setup is the setup that again I used and explained thoroughly in one of my tutorials, the liquid or the water tutorial in Unreal Engine. Now to make that happen, we need a multiply node, and that multiply node gets A from the append, and for B we want to make sure to parameterize that because we really would like to have control over displacement. So I'm going to call that displacement strength, and maybe start with something like, I don't know, 10 or 12. Now all we need to do is to bring our vertex normal WS and multiply them together. I'm going to go A, in here I'm going to go B, and then hopefully this setup should work for us. I'm just going to bring it a little bit forward, and that goes into my word position offset. I'm going to call that, I'm just going to make a comment out of that. So selecting all of them, pressing C, and I'm going to call that displacement. Now you can see that my liquid starts going up and down using this strength. I can really push that up so you see how it looks and how it moves. I can sort of bring this down a little to something like 10, and you can see now the movement is quite subtle. And I can now push this one back knowing that I have this strength in my material instance and it's ready to go. Let's save and move back, and you can see I'm getting a really pleasing result. Now it's time to add a few of these attributes to our material instance, tweak a few values, and we're pretty much done. Now what I would like to have in my material instance is these two powers, because one controls the black intensity and the other one will control the black intensity on the layer underneath. So I'm just going to right click, go into promote parameter, intensity A, and I am going to put that 2 or 3, I believe it was, so I can make use of that in my material instance. Can probably move this one back, and the other one I can parameterize to, call that intensity B, and that is going to take care of the intensity of the black points on the underneath layer, and that one is going to be 0.6. Another value that I would like to have on my material instance is these two colors. So why don't I convert that? So I'm going to go with convert to parameter, and I'm going to call that lava color A for the above layer and lava color B. Again, those names, you can definitely change them and customize to your taste, and based on your brief you may add or reduce certain values. Also, I noticed that the tiling is a bit too off, so why don't I go with 2 and 2 to basically tile it a bit more so it's not, those black points are not ginormous. Let's save out and have a look at what we have. Maybe I'm going to reduce the base intensity to 80, and we can tweak that through our material instance. All right, I believe you're there. Let's bring our material instance in, and that's the beauty of having a material instance, because that allows you to tweak things any way or any shape that you want. You can see I have my displacement. I can play around with my displacement, make it go up and down, which is obviously too much, but that might be the effect that you want. Maybe 5 will do. I can go with emissive and increase the emissive. As a matter of fact, it's not too bad. It adds more heat, so why not? If I, at any point of time, I want to get more black points, I can certainly do that. Bring up the black points on the top layer, bring in up the black points on the underneath layer. If I want to switch the speed or pace, I can do that for the bottom layer. You can see bottom layer goes a lot faster, or if I want to do the opposite, slow down the bottom layer and basically speed up the top layer, I can certainly do that. So you can see what level of customization we're having here. We are making this very much sort of live feedback type of material, where everything that we are going to practice is at our disposal. We can just use any type or any shape. You can see I can play around with the colors here. I can make this yellow a little bit greener if I feel like it, and if I feel like that would be the sort of result that I want to go for. But that really helps the level of customizability of your material. I can do exactly the same thing with my tiling as well, so I can kind of go in here and bring this value as my tiling A and tiling B. So I'm going to go that, why not? Tiling A, let's bring that in, and I believe the value for it was 2. I can go in here and select this and name that tiling B, and I'm going to save that. That gets added to my material. Now the beauty of that, obviously tiling B needs to be set to 2. Now I can just go in here and say, you know what, I want 4 and 4, and I get a slightly different tiling. And you can just go break down this. So you may want to go super high on the underneath layer and go slightly low on the above layer, and you can see how it easily breaks down everything and sort of gives a bit of sense of depth and dynamic movement to your material. So that is really it. There is really not much to add at this point. It's a really versatile, easy to tweak setup, as you can see, and it's not really too complex. We've been repurposing nodes. It's very efficient to run, and hopefully you will find this useful. All right, that is it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I truly hope you use this in your own projects. Let me know how you go in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more videos and support us on Twitter, well, X, I should say, Instagram, and Reddit. Have a great rest of your day until the next video. See you guys later.